Hey there, we're Shannon and Jerry Arner, your hosts of the Arner Adventures podcast.
We're a minimalist couple driven by intentional living and adventure.
Burned out from the 24/7 grind of running our business, we traded the hustle and the bustle for something more meaningful.
We parted ways with most of our belongings and moved to the coast.
Listen along as we chat about life's challenges, share inspiring stories of those who have taken big leaps to live a life outside of the norm,
and help you live with more intention and less physical and mental clutter.
Each episode is a step toward doing and being just a little bit better for ourselves and the world around us.
Life's an adventure after all. Join us for the ride.
It's the Arner Adventures podcast.
Hello, everyone. This is Shannon. We are back for episode 148 of the Arner Adventures podcast. Today is a solo episode. Solo as in just me, not me and Jerry solo, but just me. This episode just had so much to do with sort of what I've been experiencing lately. And I thought, you know what? All Jerry would do is just sort of probably agree with what I'm saying. And so I thought, you know what? I'm just gonna record this on my own and move through it, since I'm really, not that we're not both going through some stuff, but just since this is mainly about me, I just thought it would be more appropriate. This conversation is definitely surrounding mental health, maybe feelings of hopelessness, the topic of suicide. So if any of that is triggering for you, please don't continue. I really want, anytime I talk about mental health or anything that is going on in our lives, we both feel this way. We feel like it is just reducing the stigma that surrounds it and makes it where more people will talk about it. So that's what this episode is meant to do. So before we get into it, if you find this episode helpful, or you think that it is something that would benefit someone, please share it with a friend. We always love if you could please give us a 5-star review or rating on the podcast platform you're listening to us on, because it helps serve our content up to people who may be interested in similar conversations like this. So we really appreciate your support. The reason that this conversation came up as a topic for me is that if you're a longtime listener, you know that Jerry and I have been dealing with grief and the loss of our sweet Betty White beginning of this year. And we have not talked about it on the podcast, but if you know us or you follow us on social media, you know that we adopted another dog, Echo, in, I think it was April. And a couple months after we adopted him, he passed away. He had a brain tumor. So to say that 2024 has not been kind to us is really an understatement. And I know that there are people all over the world dealing with terrible things. But it's like I've learned in therapy that your trauma is your trauma, and it's valid to feel certain ways. So I had a conversation with someone last week, a dear friend, who was pointing out to me that I'm the only person in her life that talks about mental health, and that it was like a positive thing for her, that talking about it really opened it up where she felt like she could be more open about it. And she said, I really like when you've done episodes where you've talked about things that are going on. And I thought, I was having an okay day, but I sort of got teary, and I said, you know, I feel so unstable. And when I said it is true. I feel unstable, but I felt like it was the first time I'd really said it out loud. I mean, I'm in therapy once a week. I have no problem talking about my feelings or the way that I'm feeling or navigating through things. But when I said it, it was a little freeing just to say and admit I feel unstable. And so it kind of got me thinking about, you know, what does that mean? And how do you navigate through that when you feel unstable? And so that's what I wanted to talk about on this episode, was the feeling of being or feeling unstable. Please know that I'm not a mental health provider or professional. If you, I just want to talk about my experience, how I'm navigating through it. And if you feel like you need to seek professional help, please do. So when I feel unstable, I mean that I currently literally feel like my feet are like walking on glass. that's cracked, and any step I could just fall through. It sort of feels like just a spiral downward, and that so many things are happening that are out of my control. And that's the truth. I mean, things are happening that are out of my control, but it often feels like any step forward is just going to be my downfall. I sort of liken it to the way I feel when I'm in New York City and I'm at the Edge or Summit One Vanderbilt, and they have, those glass floors, 100 some floors up, and you're looking down, and it's just kind of jarring. And I think when I'm in a situation where I say I feel unstable, it's sort of that same feeling. My heart's racing all the time. One false step or one false move could just be detrimental, and it could maybe just lead me to emotional instability forever. I know even saying that sounds maybe extreme, but it's just the way that I feel. So, the way that I know that it becomes an issue and something I really have to be mindful about and talk about and work through is that when it affects my daily life. So it definitely impacts the work I do, the relationships I have. Lately, probably this whole year, I've wanted to keep everyone at arm's length, some not even re-entering my life, because I feel like I have this protective bubble around me. And then I'm feeling constantly like the other shoe is going to drop. And honestly, I think I also just feel like I don't want anyone to think I'm constantly sad. But I also know this year has been really fucking hard. And I am sad. And as someone who has experienced grief and burnout in the past, it really makes me feel like I have this open wound that just doesn't heal. And I feel like that even this year, my mood swings are out of control. I tend to be upset with Jerry about things that build up that may not be a big deal, but then they build up, and not addressing them makes me feel more unstable. And so the balance just isn't there. And so I talked about at the beginning of the episode, the triggers that make me feel this way. And for you, it may be something different. I mean, it is going to be different because my experiences with feeling unstable comes from the underlying anxiety and depression that I already have. And these symptoms of those disorders just get exacerbated when traumatic things happen in my life. So, the end of last year, Betty was diagnosed with lung cancer, maybe the end of the summer. And as devastating as that was, it just, no matter how prepared you think you're going to be, you're not when it actually happens. So in February, when she passed, it was just so hard. And we've been through it before with our dog Pharrell and our two cats, Kiko and Wilson. But I don't know. I think the part that was so hard about Betty too is that she came through this transition of our lifestyle change and, trying to heal from our burnout. And she was sort of on that path with us together. And I think that's probably what made it even more difficult, is that this part of our life is sort of at the end of an era, And it's just 14 years of having this being who shows you unconditional love, and your life is gone. And I think the other part of that made all of this difficult and made me feel even more unstable was the reaction from some people that we got who were in our lives. And look, let's not kid ourselves. The people who matter to us, of course, weren't like this, but there were people in our life who did not think that we should be that upset, did not think that, we didn't birth her, so why are we acting like our child is gone? And I think even just hearing someone say that and hearing, the whisperings that they were saying to other people about our situation was even more hurtful. And even though these people do not matter, I mean, truly they don't. When someone doesn't validate or respect your feelings, it just makes you feel even more isolated and unstable. So that was another trigger. Another trigger is just life working on projects with people who don't align with my values. That was a similar situation. I was in a sort of a work situation where it was coming out that these people were racist and would spew these anti-gay verbiage. It was just all these things. I'm like, oh my God. Like when someone shows you who they are, listen to them and walk away. And I did, but that was also triggering. And then, me not setting up boundaries, being pulled into a million different directions in my life. And then, we thought we had this sort of ray of light adopting Echo in April. And then with losing him, it just started this terrible spiral. And I think the consistent thing here is that I have been in therapy and even increased visits, and yet my feeling of stability is part of the stability in my life is being a great pet parent. And that is what I place a lot of value in, and advocacy for rescue animals. And I think just having two not here was just made me feel even more unstable. And it started leading to medical issues. I've talked about in the past through my burnout, I started losing my hair, my fingernails were breaking off, my skin started looking like crap. Well, all of these things started happening again. And I even started having like deep back pain and physical, I was getting sick more. These physical issues started happening. Like I had an ankle injury and had a time where I had to go get this procedure done with my eye because I thought it was just irritated and there was a piece of metal in it. I don't do any metal work or anything, so I don't know why all these things were happening, but all of these things in 2024 have just constantly made me feel even more unstable. So I got to a point, I have with my anxiety and depression, I have definitely had low moments in my life. There was a period of my life where I did not want to go on. And it happened again recently, but more extreme than ever. I mean, and this is where it might get triggering. So if it's going to disturb you, please don't listen to this. But I started having a plan and trying to figure out, how would I make this work of not going on with my life. And I know that with so many people that we even have as guests on the podcast who have gone through this and wanted to end their life, I know that desperation and I know that feeling of hopelessness. And I was telling the people in my life, I was telling them I was feeling this way. It's not like, I did all the right things. I went to therapy, I take medication, I am telling people I have a plan. And I felt like I was doing all the things. So why am I, not getting better? And one night I texted 988, which is the lifeline for suicide prevention, and started talking to this person on the other end via text. Why didn't I call? Well, honestly, I was scared if I called that they were going to send the police to me. And I didn't want to deal with that. And then later on, when I was telling my mom about it, she's like, that they could have just done the same thing because you're texting. But neither here nor there, I reached out. And without getting into the big details of that conversation, it did make me feel a lot better about things. And so I felt like, okay, I really need to work on myself and move forward and find reasons to move forward. Feeling like there's no hope is a really scary place to be. And there are some things that help me move forward. And so I'm hoping that as I go through this, that if you are feeling unstable, first of all, it's okay to feel unstable. I am no longer in that place where I think I can't go on anymore, but I know that I'm completely not stable in the way that I feel in life. I am high functioning. I move forward. There are people who are not in my day-to-day life and see me here and there and think that nothing is wrong. And I don't know, I think I've just always been that way, where I think if I just keep people away or I don't know, I just feel like if I smile, it'll be fine. I don't have to deal with it. But I do feel unstable, and I'm working towards feeling more stable. So let's go through the reasons, some things that helped, and some reasons that it is important to move forward. That, when you do find stability, which I'm working towards, it brings a sense of control. So even in small ways, like, what can I control? And I can't control everything that happens, obviously. You can definitely decide on how you respond to it, which can help you feel less like a passenger in your own life. Like if you just feel, okay, I tell you what I am going to control today. I'm going to control the list of things I'm going to do for work, or I'm going to control the way that the house is managed. I'm going to sweep and mop the floors today. what can I do what can I control? And I feel like that does make me feel more grounded and more stable. And I think that it also allows space for healing and self-compassion when you can control things, because there's so much about life that you can't control. And also, acknowledging that you're grieving or that you've been through trauma, that it takes steps and time to heal. And I will tell you, I can't stand it when people say, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I don't know. I definitely don't feel strong. And there are people in my life lately who've said, you're so strong. You went through this. You're so strong. I'm definitely not strong. I'm not. I just think that I learned to live with the pain, and I learned to live with the grief and try to build resilience, which is sort of the way that I look at it, building resilience for the future challenges. And, it doesn't take, nothing takes it away. It's sort of, as David Goggins says, it helps to callous your mind. If you just work through some calluses, then each time you cope with difficult emotions, you do build emotional resilience, which can help you feel more stable. So what do I do to cope and move forward each day? So these are some of the things that I do to help me feel less unstable. And why am I not saying more stable? Well, because right now the reality for me is not stable. It's really, how do I feel less unstable? And even when it's about survival mode, it's feeling less unstable. And that is a positive for me right now. So the first thing I do is create a daily check-in practice. And I recommend this highly. I'm very day-to-day ritualistic with what I do, but one of the things that I do is check in with myself. And even when I get back from my walk and I just have 30 minutes where I sit and meditate, or ask myself, how am I doing? Really, how am I doing? Before anything gets started, being more aware of the emotions and things that I'm leading my day with is important. And so if I'm like, Shannon, you're not doing well today, that walk this morning, seeing that person on the walk who used to always talk to Betty or whatever, there's so many triggers from the moment you walk outside of your door. Hell, there's so many triggers when you just open your eyes in the morning. But I try to have this time so I can try to turn it around and not be toxic positive, but turn it around and say, okay, yeah, this morning's walk was difficult. You need it for your mental health, Shannon. You also need it for your physical health. So, what can we do to turn this day a little bit more towards the positive needle of things? And you'll start to notice patterns as you adjust your routine or your mindset of things that you start realizing, oh, checking in with myself is really taking great care of myself. The second thing I will say is to set gentle but firm, healthy boundaries. Boundaries is something I talk about all the time that I struggle with. But at this time in my life, I am saying no so much more. Like, I don't even think I say yes to anything right now because it's like, okay, I can't be obligated for that. If you need me or you count on me, I might be there or I might be able to do that, but you should probably count on me not doing that. You know, my famous phrase, and it's true, is I don't have the bandwidth for that right now. And I will say that very quickly, but I also just say no. And that's a great way of protecting yourself. The next thing I do and highly recommend is to engage in physical grounding techniques. So like when I talk about my walks in the morning, it's a really great way of grounding myself, getting outside in the outdoors. And when I get down to the water, I always make sure that I sit on the ground near the water to just start things off that way. And I have a breathing exercise I do. All this will be linked in the show notes. It's a grounding breathing exercise. It's really great. And I think it does immediately start my day of feeling more grounded and connected and less unstable. The next thing is to allow yourself to grieve fully and without judgment. So fuck what anybody else thinks about your grief. If you lost your plant and you are grieving heavily over it, then you're grieving over it. And screw what anybody else says. I have learned more this year about the people in my life, with those who get it and those who don't, than I ever did before. Again, when people show you who they really are, listen. When they tell you who they really are by showing you, listen. It has helped me create more boundaries. Even with the people in my life who are important, when they've slipped and said things about, you know, I shouldn't be this way or I need to be doing this. I mean, that's the quickest way to get you written out of my life. Oh, I'm laughing, but it's so true. So I think that you just have to allow yourself to feel what you're feeling. And it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter what other people think about your grief or your suffering or any of it. If they're not supportive, and you know what, they may not get it, but if they're telling you you shouldn't feel a certain way, I just think that's the quickest way to run. That is the quickest sign for you to run away from that person. The next thing that may sound cheesy, but it's so true, is to seek out the moments of joy and comfort. Small things to be grateful for. It's a great gratitude practice. You know, we had Kevin Berthia on the show, and he talked about how, you know, his whole journey of putting himself first is when his eyes open in the morning, being thankful that his eyes opened and being thankful that he is breathing and that he is here. It seems small, but it's so huge. One of my really difficult weeks, I don't know, probably a couple months ago, I came back from a walk and I was like, okay, I need a gratitude practice. I can't even think of anything. I can't even think of anything to be grateful for. And I started jotting down things, even if it was, you know, literally hearing the seagulls on my walk. I was going to say the birds singing, but the seagulls on my walk, hearing them makes me remember that I live near the ocean. And that was something to be grateful for. And so what I did was I started jotting those down, and I decided I was going to do it all day. Every time I thought of something, I was going to jot it down. And it ended up, then my goal was to come up with 100 things to be grateful for. And so I did. I came up with a list of 100 things. And anytime I think I can't think of anything, I go to that list, which is linked in the show notes, by the way. It's called 100 Things to be Grateful For When You Don't Think There Is Anything. And some of them might not be applicable to you, but it may at least get you, thinking of things that you are grateful for or that you can implement into your gratitude practice. The next thing that I've talked about several times on this episode is to consider speaking with a mental health professional. Talk therapy is very important in my life. It is something that I know I would not be here today if I didn't have. It's wonderful when you also find your match with a therapist, because I've had a couple of therapists in the past who did not, quote unquote, get it. And it made it really difficult. And I knew they didn't get it by their comments that they didn't get it. And, you don't necessarily need to find a therapist who's been through what you've been through, but you definitely want them to have empathy and compassion and understanding of what you're going through. And so I have a great therapist now. Therapy is probably the most stable part of my life throughout this year. And I've just learned that the things I blame myself for are usually the result of things I've previously been through, and which most of the time were no fault of my own. And I've just learned to be more gentle to myself and work on that inner dialogue of just being kinder to Shannon and talking kinder to Shannon in my brain and just changing the way that all of that goes. And I realize that therapy is also not affordable for a lot of people. So in the show notes, I have some resources that I share with you, some people to call, like your local social services clinic. Social services, social workers are a wealth of resources, even if they don't have it in your local, county social services program. They usually know of a program that may be no cost or sliding fee scale. So I highly recommend you looking into that, but you can access information about that in the show notes. And I think the last thing here is, again, may sound cheesy, but to be here now, to live in this moment. My therapist says, the anxiety and worry that I have is my brain trying to keep me somewhere else other than here. So it's usually worrying about something that's in the future or reminiscing about something in the past, and I just have all this anxiety over it. And so I just really try to constantly remind myself to be here now. And if I don't do that, I can really get into a bad place. And I now I'm getting to where when negative thoughts come into my head about, sometimes they're good memories I can have, but I know right now I can hardly take the good memories. I have to just move and say, okay, right now, Shannon, like this is what is going to make you feel less unstable. This is going to ground you. This is going to make you feel safe. And it's a daily work in progress. Sometimes it's hourly, but I've learned to be able to take those things one step at a time and know that I can't fix everything at once. And progress doesn't have to be linear. And healing can look differently every single day. And I'm just learning to be okay with being content. And I'll just kind of end this with just telling you that no matter where you are in your journey, if you feel unstable at this moment, if you have felt unstable all year, if you feel like the world is crumbling, please know that there is hope there. You have to find it, but the worst place to be in is not feeling like there is hope. And one of the things that I am so grateful for to have heard when I reached out, when I didn't think there was hope anymore, and I didn't think I could at all feel remotely better, the words to me were, Shannon, you deserve to see this get better. And to me, it was just like a light, a glimmer of hope in a very dark time this year. And so I hope that you, the listener, know that you deserve to see it get better. So if today is not a good day, this month has not been a good month, this year has definitely not been a good year. And if you feel like you're in that boat too, please know you deserve to see it get better. I hope that being open and honest about my struggles will be helpful to someone listening to this, or who may be in a similar situation or know someone who's in a similar situation. And I'm not trying to be a Debbie Downer. I just try to be real. And today is a decent day. And I'm just going to ride on that, There are severe cases out there. And if you right now are currently having suicidal thoughts or feeling that you have no hope, please reach out to someone. I highly recommend the 988 Lifeline. You can call or text 988 and you'll find the support on the other end extremely helpful and not intimidating. And I just want you to please get help if you need it. And just know that there is hope. And sometimes you need help in having it pointed out to you.
If this episode resonated with you, or if you know of someone who would benefit from what we talked about, please share it with a friend.
It's a great way of supporting the podcast, and we really appreciate it.
Another way of supporting the pod is by leaving us a 5-star review or rating on the platform you are listening to us on.
And go ahead and hit that subscribe button. That also supports us. You can always find us, the show notes, and sponsors who support the podcast at arneradventures.com.
And until next time, enjoy the journey you're on. We're wishing you lots of adventures.
Bye-bye.